revered and influential social scientist in the recorded human history. And today I am going to have a review of his famous book Das Kapital, which was written by his friend Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx. After the death of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels actually finished the second volume, and actually a very big number of this book, a very big number of chapters of this book are in fact written down by both of these authors. Even though it was very initially written down in Germany, later on translated into English for several times, I want to actually have a very gloss over regarding the kind of changes they actually went through over here. The very book, Karl Marx Capital, it was actually published into two volumes. The first volume is this is the first volume I want to actually talk about it, a critical analysis of capitalist production that we'll be talking about. As you know, Karl Marx, whenever we are talking about the Karl Marx's ideologies, we are just obsessed with his economics and religious issues and social division, as well as the historical as well as dialectical materialism. The way people like Engels and Karl Marx are actually considered as young Hegelians, even though they revolted against his historical materialist point of view of analytic historical viewing economics and history. They revolted against it, and they made dialectic method of knowing history in a way that was very much wonderful. Today I want to have discussion about fundamental topics which are written down over here. The first chapter was commodities and money. The second chapter was the transformation of money into capital. Third chapter, the production of absolute surplus value. Surplus value is something which needs to be explained with amounts of time. Production of relative surplus value, whenever talking about it, it's also the production of absolute and relative surplus value, the accumulation of capital and wealth, and so-called primitive accumulation of the wealth. I want to actually go through some of the part over here which was written down by Karl Marx himself. He actually wrote at the very end of it, at the very last time, whenever we're talking about economics, it was nothing more than political economy. In fact, back then they were obsessed with the industrial revolution, when the class struggle was very much clear after the division of the labor process, when means and mode of production was actually owned by the bourgeois community in the society, and the proletariat were supposed to be suffering from extensive amount of difficulties. It was the question in the minds of people like Karl Marx, who wanted to actually change the societal perspective or rhetoric to totally change it through a massive radical revolution. In fact, Karl Marx ideologies are mostly considered as Marxism, but whenever we're talking about communist ideologies of leftist thinkings, we don't talk about Engelism. I have never heard the word Engelism or Marx. I haven't heard anything about Engels, who was co-author of this very book, and he had a profound influence of Karl Marx, and also Karl Marx also influenced him too. Both of them were interchangeably used, influenced by one another. I have gone through this book several times in my lifetime, and when I started going through this book for the first time in my lifetime, it was back in 2014. I was so much obsessed with communist thinking, because one of the very favorite person of my life, whose name is Professor Mushtaq Ahmad. He is a very wonderful scholar and renowned man from my hometown, Cox's Bazar, the longest sea beach of Bangladesh, from which actually I am coming. This is my hometown. Over there I was talking about communism, socialism, religion, culture, society, economics, all these things. I was actually inspired to have studies on these issues by this very great person. So what I would like to actually focus on over here is that whenever you're talking about Marx's ideas of analyzing history, you have got lots of actually confusions about Karl Marx's ideologies, the way Karl Marx is actually interpreted in countries to countries. When it went to Latin American countries, people like Antonio Gramsci made it something like critical. When it went to Russia, it went into another form. It became Leninism. When it went to countries like Venezuela, it became like Fidel Castro, Raul Castro kind of ism in Venezuela, in Cuba. In Venezuela, you have got Hugo Chavez, Nicolas Maduro in very recent times. So these people have changed their ideological viewpoints. Even in China, as you have been watching, Maoism has been taking all the kinds of things from the classical Marxism. But this is not the real Marxism. Those people who are now adopting Marxism in China, they are called reactionary, because they do not adopt the very classical form of Marxism. Because when Karl Marx was alive in the world, when his disciples started actually revealing his truths and the way he interpreted the things all around, he himself asserted that if it is the Marxism, I myself is not a Marxist. So since the very lifetime of Karl Marx, there are so many confusions within the people that whenever you're talking about making a society free from injustice, free from socio-cultural economic divisions and all the exploitations, economic and political, cultural, religious exploitations, in fact there you have got massive amount of changes, just because Karl Marx actually interpreted, analyzed these things from the perspective of Germany and the European, especially Western Europe, when capitalist bourgeois community went into the very affects level of the society, and it started having mass crackdown on the people. And when it went to Russia kind of countries, it became very much Bolshevik party came forward, and they did so much crazy things in their countries, in their respective countries. From 1917 up to 1990, there are massive differences, because people like Joseph Stalin, Lenin, they changed Marxism, communism in accordance with their country, in accordance with their perspective and time. So Karl Marx's ideas of Das capitalism should not be actually viewed from the point of view of Karl Marx in accordance with his time. Just because we live in 21st century, we are supposed to be living in a society where secular, liberal, democratic society, where Karl Marx's idea of dictatorship of proletariat has been very much antiquated, and most importantly, democracy has been now the very most popular and the most ultimately adopted forms of governance in the society. And capitalism is also kind of is running so rapidly, as Karl Marx asserted that capitalism is going to engulf or take away it's consume itself. But at the end of the day, this is the very cycle of cycle of poverty, the way people are economically exploited more and more, and the more people are getting exploited, the worse social, cultural, political, religious perspectives are changing in accordance with the political, religious happenings in our society. So that's a very common simple review I wanted to have over here. I went through it several times, but I would like to request to the people out there, in fact in almost all the countries have used it for their own purposes. As Robert Cox asserted that theory is always for someone and for some purpose. So Karl Marx also invented lots of ideas along with his friends, and then it was to demand the choices of particular group of people back in those Western Europe-centric worldview. And in a world like this one, socialism is a very nasty word still in the American politics, even though I'm a big supporter of Bernie Sanders, as someone who is a secular Jew. And I don't want to actually talk about the Judaism and the Zionist principle. In fact, Zionism became very much extremist in the hands of evangelical Christians, not in the hands of Jews. Most of the Jews are secular, and they are the supporters of the Palestinian liberation movement. I don't want to talk about it. Karl Marx himself was a Jew, and he suffered extensively for his views in the hands of his job, his company man, who actually fired him from the job at the very end of his lifetime. He suffered extensive amount of economic problems. His kids died, and he actually died in London Even though he was born in Germany, he actually fled from one country to another, and at the end of the day he went into this very conclusion that his ideas were very much distorted even in his lifetime. So his prediction came true, that when it went to other countries, it changed it in accordance with its expectations. So it's a very common phenomenon, even if it happens in case of capitalism in Bangladesh and in Saudi Arabia and in USA, Canada. Capitalism is very much different. In socialism, it's also different. So Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, religion is also different. The religion of Christianity in United States is totally different from the Christianity in Arab countries. And religion of Islam, Muslims in America hold a very different view comparing with the Muslims in India or other subcontinent states. So you have always the changes in Marxist, religious, cultural, economic point of view, as long as the time and socio-cultural, economic perspective of that history is changing. So class struggle, this very form of Karl Marx, and he wanted the dictatorship of proletariat became a very bizarre idea at the end of his lifetime, because capitalist economy, I mean when you're talking about the philosophical view, the extreme point of the society is to have a dictatorship of anything, either it be socialism, communism or democracy. Even if you're talking about some democratic states where a government or a leader is frequently elected by the people, that particular government is going to be doing wonderful. So if a government, whether it be socialist or capitalist, Marxist, religious, even doesn't matter, if it is always in the same leadership, or what I say, it can be authoritarian but it will have massive development. So you have got two contradiction, whether you want democracy or development. It's your choice. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much.